Hi guys, welcome back to another video, one that I'm actually very excited for because as you could see in the title and on the thumbnail, for this video I read a couple of recommendations that my favorite book YouTubers gave me. Now these following book YouTubers are not going to be in any particular order, and if they were, then I would start off with Cari because she's my favorite, but so that no one can accuse me of favoritism, we're going to start off with someone else, and that's someone being Jack Edwards, or Jack in the Books as his second channel is called. How did I get to know Jack's channel? That was when I was actually doing research on the uni he used to attend, that is Durham University in the UK. I was doing research on that uni and I typed it into YouTube because I wanted to see like a vlog of the campus to see what it looks like, and his channel popped up because he actually used to be, well, yeah, a uni student lifestyle kind of channel, but now he graduated and that's why he transitioned into booktube basically. But yeah, so that's how I got to know him and I've been following him ever since. I really like his like way of producing videos. He's like very funny and witty, man's knows a pun or two, that's for sure. So yeah, I think his way of making his videos very entertaining. So the book I picked up because Jack talked about it is this one right here, Hamnet. He talked about this on both of his channels. He first mentioned it on his second channel when he was doing this like Cambridge bookstore tour. He mentioned that he had picked this one up, and he also mentioned it in I think his most recent video where he talked about 40+ books he picked up that he now wants to get into. So fair disclaimer, Jack has not reviewed this book yet. He has only talked about that he like got it and is like very excited about reading it, but he has not per se given a recommendation of this book, but he inspired me to get this, so that's why this one counts. Okay, so Hamnet, like the title itself might already strike you a bit like, wait, that's kind of close to Hamlet, and yeah, that's exactly where we need to be heading, because yes, this book is centered around Shakespeare, kind of, or it's supposed to be centered about Shakespeare's kids and his wife, because Hamnet was actually one of Shakespeare's kids. It was like the twin boy he had. But that's already like the first catch of this book. This book being called Hamnet, I thought it was like solely gonna be about Shakespeare's family, as in like his kids being like the central like protagonist, etc. But what this actually ended up being was like a 50-50 kind of thing, right? So like 50% of the book we're like in the present tense of like the kids' life, but then like half the time at least of the book we're going even further back into the past to like learn about Shakespeare when he was like a young adult, how he got to know his wife, his like struggles with his father, and like with, yeah, what kind of job does he want to pursue, etc. So that one kind of, yeah, it kind of like just surprised me because the title is like literally the boy's name, so I thought it was gonna be about him, etc. But it ended up still being about Shakespeare actually. But like a very remarkable thing about this book is that like Shakespeare's name never gets mentioned in this book, but it's about Shakespeare, right? Anyway, but yeah, I just thought honestly this book was going to be something else than what it turned out to be. Plus, as I mentioned before, we have this obvious connection between, okay, his son was called Hamnet and he has this play called Hamlet. There must be a sort of connection, and like actually the first page of the book already mentions that. It's like the historical note, it's like literally before the actual novel start, and it says, in the 1580s a couple lived in Henley Street, Stratford, had 3 children, Susanna, then Hamnet and Judith, who were twins. The boy Hamnet died in 1596, aged 11. 4 years or so later, the father wrote a play called Hamlet. So like the book's already in the very beginning makes this connection, but the actual like story only picks up that connection again in like the last 20 to 30 pages, and that part I actually enjoyed the most. But considering this book is almost 400 pages long and I only kind of really was interested in like those last 20 to 30 pages, it was not the most exciting read. And like, if you have not watched any of my other videos, you might not know this about me, but I am actually interested in Shakespeare. I even like took a lecture on him this semester and read like 7 to 8 plays of his because of that lecture. So it's not like I went into this book not being interested in Shakespeare at all, and now like, oh, this book was kind of boring. No, I am actually interested in Shakespeare, but still, I don't know, I did not find this book to be gripping per se, and that like most interesting thing, that like connection between Hamnet and Hamlet the play, was only like mentioned or addressed in like the last very last part. So I'm not usually giving like star ratings, but personally I would only give this like a 2.5 or 3 out of 5 stars, because like this wasn't a bad book, but personally I also didn't find it to be a good book. And I mean, people are raving about it. I think it won like all kinds of prizes, so fair enough, maybe it's just me, but that's just like my take on it. Okay, moving on to another one of my favorite book YouTubers, that one being uncarley, as is called her YouTube channel, or Carly Thorne. She's relatively new in the YouTube game, but you wouldn't be able to see that because her channel has already grown to like over 110,000 subscribers. Props to you, Carly. So how did I get to know Carly's channel? That was actually via my YouTube algorithm, my bestie, right? Recommended to me one of her videos that sadly enough is not on her channel anymore. She mentioned in her, not most recent, but one of her recent videos, that she had to take that video down because it was posted on a man's right page. Like, first of all, what even is that? Second of all, that's like so sad that she felt the need to like take down one of her videos because, I don't know, I guess people were raving about it on that page. I don't even know the particulars, but that was just like, oh no, I was sad to hear that, you know? And like that video she was talking about is like, it was her introduction to poetry or something like that, it was called. And now, why did I click on that channel? Not because I am a poetry lover, but because I am a poetry noob, 100%. And if anything, I would even go so far as to say that I kind of actively do not maybe like poetry because of two things. First of all, it kind of has this pretentious touch for me. Plus, most of the time I find poetry incredibly inaccessible, as in like I do not understand what these people are actually trying to tell me, or it's like in such a roundabout way, and I'm just like, what? But that might just be like the kind of like old poetry you get to read in school and stuff that I was never able to get into. But that's kind of like why I have almost like a negative view on poetry. It's just like not my thing at all. But that's why this video kind of intrigued me, being like, okay, I actually don't really like poetry at all. Let me hear what this girl can tell me about it. Then maybe I will start to like it, whatever. So I clicked on the video, discovered her channel. And one of the books she mentioned, or like poetry collections, she mentions in that video, but then she has also mentioned in a few other of her videos, because it is one of her favorite books, is Serious Concerns by Wendy Cope. Now, this is a contemporary poetry collection, which played a big deal in me liking it a bit more, because it was not just like old white man writing stuff centuries ago. This is like a modern day British woman writing in the 21st century, which was immediately a lot more accessible. So the one poem that Carly read out of this collection in that video, which made me be like, oh wait, that actually is kind of nice, was a poem called, let me find it, The Orange. I'm going to read it to you now like Carly did in her video. At lunchtime, I bought a huge orange. The size of it made us all laugh. I peeled it and shared it with Robert and Dave. They got quarters and I got a half. And that orange, it made me so happy, as ordinary things often do. Just lately, the shopping, a walk in the park, this peace and contentment, it's new. The rest of the day was quite easy. I did all the jobs on my list. I enjoyed them and had some time over. I love you. I'm glad I exist. Now this, she read that poem and was like, oh damn, that is actually kind of heartwarming. I do understand what this poem is supposed to be about, so I kind of like that. So I decided to pick this up. And as I just have already said, this being like a contemporary poetry collection already made all of the poems in this book for sure much more accessible, and I understood what they were supposed to say basically. Obviously I did not love all of the poems in here, but there are actually especially two more that I gave a little star because I thought they were actually very very good. And so I'm going to read them to you. The second one is called Some More Light Verse. You ready? You have to try, you see a shrink. You learn a lot, you read, you think. You struggle to improve your looks, you meet some men, you write some books. You eat good food, you give up junk, you do not smoke, you don't get drunk. You take up yoga, walk and swim, and nothing works, the outlook's grim. You don't know what to do, you cry, you're running out of things to try. You blow your nose, you see the shrink, you walk, you give up food and drink. You fall in love, you make a plan, you struggle to improve your man. And nothing works, the outlook's grim, you go to yoga, cry and swim. You eat and drink, you give up looks, you struggle to improve your books. You cannot see the point, you sigh, you do not smoke, you have to try. Like that one again, it was like, oh my god, damn, that is nice. That has a good message, a very relatable message, which is why I liked it, I think. And now like the third poem I want to read to you. That one actually has a backstory. Like I personally am a big Agatha Christie fan. I made like a whole video about her. I will link it up above and down below. And in that video I have already mentioned Agatha Christie's novel And Then There Were None, and how it is closely tied to like a nursery rhyme called 10 Little Soldiers. And like that poem basically ends with like, and then there were none. And like this murder mystery novel is like spinned off of that nursery rhyme. And she took it up and put her own spin on it, and I thought it was hilarious. This poem is called Publishers. 5 happy publishers going through a door. One met an author, and then there were 4. 4 happy publishers out on a spree. Someone had to pay the bill, and then there were 3. 3 happy publishers, nothing much to do. A big fat manuscript arrived, and then there were 2. 2 happy publishers having lots of fun. An author won a major prize, and then there was 1. 1 happy publisher, radiant as the sun. The winner found an agent, and then there were none. So this one I just found so funny because I know and love that Agatha Christie novel based off of that nursery rhyme, and that how she picked it up. I thought it was amazing. So like in general, what can I say about this book, this poetry collection as a poetry noob? As I've already said several times, this being contemporary made it very accessible. You understood what the author was actually, or like the lyrical eye, whatever, was actually talking about, what they wanted to say. A lot of the poems had like a satirical twist to them at the end, which was kind of funny. So yeah, I did enjoy this. I don't know, what would I give this? I think I would even, like for a poetry collection, I guess I would give this 5 out of 5 stars, because I was not like totally disappointed or something by it, but I was like, okay, yeah, that is actually poetry I can get behind. But like still in general, did this change my entire outlook on poetry? Maybe not. Like I don't think poetry will ever be like my favorite genre of text. I will always prefer prose or drama over poetry. I think, who knows, maybe a few years down the line I'm gonna be like the new poetry stan, who knows. But like me reading this in my current state of mind, I actually enjoyed this, so thank you, Carly, for recommending. Now moving on to who I've already said is my fave, that is Miss Cari Cakes, or Cari Can Read as her booktube channel is called. Cari is a American YouTuber based in Seoul, Korea, and on like her main channel, she does like lifestyle videos, I guess, like her life in Seoul basically, and like her life within Korea, etc. And I love it a lot. I love her videos. And now like her booktube channel is heavily influenced by Cari's current obsession, and that being YA fantasy. Like she reads a ton of YA fantasy books. Now personally, fantasy is not really my genre, except for Harry Potter, but Harry Potter to me is like a genre in itself. I would not necessarily call it fantasy, though I mean, yeah, of course, kind of, but Harry Potter is such a monolithic thing. It's like a thing in itself. But like other than that, I was never into fantasy. So you have to know that about me. And also like the YA part, personally, like with the books I'm reading, I have found I think I'm just beyond my YA, enjoying YA literature days. Now, like, obviously enjoying YH literature is not tied to like a specific age group and you're like only allowed to read it when you're in that age group. Obviously not. But like the past YA books that I have read that were like even like non-fantasy, they were just like, I'm just past that phase, I think. Like, especially if it's like books taking place in like high school settings. No, I cannot read that anymore. So that's why actually like YA fantasy, not my thing at all. Still, I love Cari and her videos, so I watch them even if I like know she's probably not going to talk about books that I would actually consider picking up. But she managed to make one book actually sound appealing to me, and that is because I love the format she presented that one book in. So this book that I'm going to talk about right now, food plays a big role in it, and me being a big foodie, I like that part, and like I guess Cari liked that part too, because she presented that book in like a video format, which I think she calls book and bake or something. Like, what she did is, while she was talking about the book, she baked a cake that was, I think, actually only at one point mentioned in the book. And since this book, it is like a fantasy taking place in like a fantasy land, so you can't compare like one-to-one to like real world countries, but it's loosely supposed to be in like South America, like in the like Bolivia, Paraguay region, right? So what Cari made was like I think it was like a hazelnut or like a walnut cake with like dulce de leche in the middle. It had me drooling for sure, and I had her drooling. So I just loved the format she presented the book in so much that I decided to pick it up. And I also like those food aspects she mentioned, so I was like, okay, you know what, I'm gonna give this one a try. And that book is Woven in Moonlight. I know what you're thinking, and quite possibly the cover also took a role in me deciding to get this, because it's a bit over the top, but it is also pretty cute, I think. Anyways, so yeah, as I have just mentioned, this is a YA fantasy. So now, a bit of world building, you need to understand this. So in this like fictional country, or like these fictional countries, they are like, the plot is centered around like two populations basically. They are like the Illustrians on the one hand, and wait, what are the other ones called? Give me a second. Yeah, I don't know what the other ones are called anymore. So like they are the Illustrians and the other ones. And so I think the history goes like this, like it was the land of the other ones, and then the Illustrians took over. And now at the present state that this book is taking place, the other ones that this land originally belonged to, they have like a push back the Illustrians again, and like there's this war going on, etc. pp. And so our main girl, I think her name is Katarina, she's the decoy of the Illustrian princess. And now to like end this war, the king of like this other population, gosh, I don't remember any names, wants to marry the princess of the Illustrians to kind of like unite those two populations again, to bring on peace, right? And they send the decoy, they sent Katarina to like the keep of like this other royal family to like marry this king, right? And that's basically the setup. She has to go into the enemy land and live at the court and potentially marry the king, and she's obviously not happy about it. And that's where the story takes off. I don't think I have to say much more about the book per se, like the plot. It was okay. It wasn't bad or like too boring. It was okay. Like you get through it pretty quickly. Like this looks thicker than it actually is because it's like in a large print, whatever. What I remember because I read this some time ago, but what I remember quite distinctly is that the like end battle scene was ridiculously short. I remember that. And like, no, don't get me wrong, I'm not like a sucker for like never-ending battle scenes, not at all, but it was just like so ridiculous because everything else in this book is described in quite a lot of detail. Because like the main girl, like the only fantasy part of this book is kind of like that the main girl, she can weave moonlight into tapestry and it kind of comes alive or something. So yeah, okay, And that is like described in epic detail, or like her wondering about the castle, blah blah blah. Everything is described in quite a lot of detail. And then like I was nearing the end of the book and I was like, shit, there are only like 30 pages left and like the battle hasn't even begun. What is going to happen right here? But then the battle did take place, but it was just like ridiculous because everything was laying in like ruins basically, and a hell of a lot of people were dead within like half a page, and that just it didn't feel right. Anyways, so much for that. And like the other thing I want to mention about this book, I think when the second part came out, Cari reposted like an Instagram post on her story that mentioned that around like the first and the second part, there is apparently some controversy because it is accused of sugarcoating basically, or like favoring colonialism, or like colonialist views kind of. And I see where that is coming from, because you remember how I told you that the stories about that, like those illustrians took over the land of these other people, and now like these other people, for pushing them back again, are kind of presented as the enemies, right? So that is definitely true in the beginning of the book. But then what this book is really about is how like Katarina, I think that's her name, Catalina, I think it is, whatever, while she is staying at that like a court where she has to marry the king, she comes to that realization like, ooh, what we did was not okay, and we kind of have to find a solution, or like us taking over that land again cannot, like that's not right either, like we cannot do that again. So like she comes to that realization that what happened in the past is wrong, etc. So I don't know, like that criticism to me ringed a bit like if you called Kim Ji-young a misogynistic book because it talks about misogyny, but that doesn't make it a misogynistic book, because it's not like it's supporting the things it's talking about. So yes, of course, this at the beginning, the main character has like those colonial views, thinking that like her people are in the right, etc. But she comes to that realization that, oh no, that was bad what happened. So I think that that criticism doesn't really hold true. But like, I did not dive deeper into that debate. I only saw the one Instagram post like months ago, so don't come at me. I don't know like if there are other arguments on each side, but that was, I read that post and I read the books, and that's like my hot take on it now. Okay, anyways, now the second to last YouTuber I want to mention is Emmie. I actually do not remember the first ever video of her I watched. I think it might have been like recommendation of classic literature, because if you know Emmie, you might know her as like the classics girl on YouTube. She reads, I think she also like studies classic literature, like English literature. So that's why she reads a lot of that. But also I think due to personal interest, she's like very into classical literature. So she reads a lot of that on her channel. So I have to be honest though, the following book, I did not pick up because she mentioned it in one of her videos. It was more like I wanted to read this book anyways. And sorry, my neighbor just came out on her balcony and I'm not sure if she can see me. Okay, but yeah, I wanted to read this book anyway. Then I thought of this video idea and was like, okay, can I include that book somehow? And I thought that Emmie would be a good representative. And I did check her Goodreads and she actually did read this book, but like in 2017. Anyways, the book that I'm talking about is Jane Austen's Northanger Abbey. Now, Northanger Abbey is Jane Austen's Gothic novel, though to be fair, you have to say that it is almost like a parody on the Gothic novel. So the Gothic novel, in case you don't know, is like a subcategory of the Victorian novel. And what you have in mind is probably true right now. If you picture, okay, like Gothic setting, okay, is that like gray skies, old castles, maybe a little bit of like supernatural stuff happening? Exactly, that is exactly what Gothic novels are about. What would be a Gothic novel is, for example, Dracula, or Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, etc. But this book does not have any of those elements. It is more like, as I said, a parody on those Gothic novels. So I think this book can easily be divided into like two parts. Like the first part is kind of like Bridgerton. Now, I'm sure you've watched at least the first episode, because haven't we all, to see what the hype is about, and then maybe you somehow for some reason ended up watching all 8 episodes. Yeah, that happened to some people apparently. Anyways, so yeah, the first half of the book is kind of like that, as in like our girl gets introduced into society in Bath, and that is actually where Bridgerton was being filmed. But it is not as glamorous as Bridgerton, and there's not like this 50 Shades of Grey connotation to it. Like, don't head into this book expecting that. That would be disastrous, because that is not what this book is about in any way, shape, or form. But so yeah, in the first half of the book, our girl's staying in Bath. She's like meeting people, making friends, but like in a very harmless way. Like that is where like the Bridgerton parallel ends. And then the second half of the book, she spends at Northanger Abbey, which is like this majestic country estate. I'm not spoiling this, I think, by saying this, but she's like imagining all kinds of stuff, like gothic things basically happening, like, ooh, are there ghosts? Is there a murder going on? When there actually isn't. And she's just like imagining all of that because she has read a lot of gothic literature, and like being at that like old estate in the countryside, she wants those things to happen kind of, but really she's just imagining stuff. And yeah, there's some more stuff happening, but I'm not going to say anything else. Anyway, so this I enjoyed quite a lot. Actually, I'm also taking another lecture on the Victorian novel this semester, so reading this, hearing about it in my lecture, it was very fitting, you know. So yeah, I really enjoyed this. Oh yeah, this I would give, hell yeah, I think like 5 out of 5 stars. Like, I think this is a very accessible Jane Austen novel, even if you're not into Jane Austen. I think this would be a good place to start, actually. Oh yeah, the other one, the Woven in Moonlight, how much stars would I give this? Maybe like a 3 out of 5. It was not very good. It was okay. Okay, and now the last book YouTuber and the last book I kind of want to mention is the book Leo, and the book that I read for her is Ninth House. So the book Leo, I think the first video I watched of her, I only recently got into her channel, and I think the one was like her reading book talk books and like giving her a hot take on it. I think that was the first one. And in her wrap up of 2020, like best books of 2020, she mentioned this book, Ninth House. And this was like another one of those, I wanted to read this book anyways. Then she talked about it, and I thought I could just like include this in this video. Now, I have already told you I am not a fantasy person. Now, why did I pick up this book, which is a fantasy novel? My friend read it, and the way she described that book, I actually was like, okay, wait a second, that might be a fantasy I could get behind, because this is kind of like a dark academia setting. It takes place in Yale University, and it is like about secret societies and murder and mystery, and like that sound pretty good to me, so I decided to pick this up. But yeah, there is quite a major fantasy element, as in like there are ghosts and like all these secret societies, they do like their freaky rituals to do all kinds of stuff. And our main girl, she's like part of a like the Ninth House that's supposed to like supervise the magic taking place at all those rituals kind of. As you can see, I'm like about halfway through. I am not obsessed with this, to be honest. Like the fantasy part is, I think it's like too big for me to thoroughly enjoy this, because like as I mentioned, like for example with the Woven in Moonlight, the fantasy aspect was like quite small, so it wasn't like too much for me to handle kind of. But this, yeah, I mean, my friend actually warned me, but I wanted to read it, or like try to read it anyways. But yeah, the fantasy aspect in this is quite big, but that's not even necessarily the thing that kind of puts me off about this book. The thing that puts me off is like, this is like a warning if you want to read it, there's a lot of like violence, gore, and like freaky shit happening in this book. And there were especially like at this point 2 instances where shit went down that was so freaky that I wanted to put this book down, because it was just like to a point where I was like, no, I don't want to continue this book. What is the story? Right? I ended up still continuing it for a bit, and because I hate to leave things in general, but also books unfinished. I hate that. So am I gonna finish this? I don't think so, because like yesterday I ordered a couple of new books, and when they start to arrive, I think I'm gonna start reading those and not continue this, because yeah, this like gore whatever element, it's just like a bit too much for me personally. So just know about that. But still, like, knowing nothing about fantasy, really, I feel like I'm not the right person to review a fantasy book, obviously. But if you're also maybe not into fantasy and you thought about picking this up, maybe only do that if you're like okay with a lot of freaky stuff happening. Okay, you guys, those were all the books and all the YouTubers I wanted to talk to you about. This video is long enough as it is, so I think I'm going to end it here. Thank you so much for watching, and I'm going to see you in the next video. Bye!